Hello everyone and welcome to Avoiding the Time Trap. My name is Shad Slaughter. I'm an adjunct at the University of Utah and also at Westminster College. For my full-time job, I'm Vice President of Operations for Clear in Utah County. I'm also a father of 4 young kids and really enjoy recreating in the mountains and deserts of Utah. So time is something that has always been important to me and interesting to me, and something that I find if I manage properly brings a lot more satisfaction and gratification to life. So I wanted to share a few of the things about avoiding the time trap and becoming a time master instead of a victim of time. So the first thing I'd like you to do is push pause and do a little activity. And what I want you to do is divide a piece of paper up into 2 columns. On one column, put down productive uses of time, and in the other column, put down wastes of time. So go ahead and push pause, and when you're done with that, you can hit play again. Okay, so now that you've had your list, I'm sure your list looks similar to many of the other lists as we've done this in person. So typically on the productive side, see things like studying, exercise, reading, traveling, and then on the waste of time side, generally things like binge watching Netflix, social media, and any video games, and any other number of other things that are categorized as a waste of time. The reality is that there's something missing from that question, and what was missing from that question is context. If we look at it, the value of any activity is really largely dependent on its effect on our goals. So the idea is that while reading or exercise or studying are viewed as generally good activities, there are times in which those good activities may not meet or help us get to the goals that we have. On the same side, there are video games, watching TV, social media, kind of generally perceived as wastes of time, and yet if they're helping us relax, if we've allocated the time for that, if we're finding enjoyment for that, those activities aren't necessarily bad. So engaging in activities with arbitrary values assigned to them creates a false reality. And that, again, if I've got a deadline to meet on a paper or a work project, and I decide that I'd rather go out for a run, while generally exercise is viewed as a good use of time, going for a run at that particular time might not help me achieve what I want to achieve. I call this the loop. And the loop is this idea that, and I suffer from this pretty significantly. I've been challenged with focus and looked for ways to improve my focus. And the loop is really this idea that when you're doing one thing and thinking about another. So when I'm at work, I find my mind wandering, and I enjoy mountain biking, and so I'll be at work or I'll be prepping for class and I'll be thinking about mountain biking. And the challenge is that when I'm actually scheduled and have some time to go enjoy a ride, oftentimes I find myself focused on work or on prepping for a class. And the trick then with time is to align the activity with where your mind is. And that really comes down to this idea of focus. Now, focus is a challenging subject because everyone is a little bit different in their ability to focus. Some people focus comes naturally to, and some people have to work at it, and or it's naturally challenging. Well, before we jump in too far, I want to throw up a few gee whiz things regarding time here. So the average person uses 13 different methods to control and manage their time. Okay, 95% of self-improvement books, tapes, and videos purchased are never used. In the last 20 years, working time has increased by 15%, and leisure time has decreased by 33%. To me, seems like a little bit of an imbalance. Again, it goes to what your primary goals and objectives are. Most crisis management events are preventable, and stress spelled backwards is desserts. I'm not sure how much relevance that has, but I thought that was kind of funny. So we're going to look at this, and this first one where it says that we use 13 different methods to control and manage our time. I just threw up a bunch of logos of companies that exist with this idea of helping manage time. And the challenge is that instead of viewing these as what they are and they're tools for managing our time, we view them as solutions or maybe magic ways of managing our time. And really what it comes down to is that they are just tools. So I took a picture of my garage board there, and these tools enable me to build something, but the tools themselves won't do the building. I still have to be in charge. I still have to take control. And so it is with the tools for managing time. And the challenge with having so many options is that oftentimes we end up with the tail wagging the dog. What we mean by the tail wagging the dog is that the objectives soon get lost in managing the programs or going through the routine, and we kind of lose sight of it. So when we're looking at time management is part of that, so time management. So management is the effective and efficient use of resources to meet a goal or objective. There's that word again, goal. What are we trying to achieve? The value of an activity, the value of a use of time is based upon what it's doing to achieve an end purpose or to achieve a goal. Well, when we're talking about time management, really it's not time management, it's self-management. Time is a constant. I know with there's some physics I probably will get in trouble by saying that, but generally we're allocated this, a minute is a minute, an hour is an hour, a week is a week, a year is a year, and some of us will end up with more years than others on this earth, but the time passes consistently for all of us. And so it's not about managing or controlling time, it's about managing and controlling ourselves, how we use that time. Because time really is a zero-sum game. Some of us don't have more than others as far as in the present time. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to decide what we want to gain. What is the goal? What is the objective? We have to define success. So as we look at defining success or success is going to be unique to every individual. Everyone has different visions or different ideas of what success is. And in all honesty, that vision or idea of success is also fluid. It changes as we go through life. It's not always the same. But it's very important to identify what that is. So for me, I categorize success into some different categories here. So for me, primary categories that I'm looking at to succeed in life are personal. So hobbies, health, relaxation, family, my kids, my wife, my home life. Teaching, I enjoy teaching. It's something that being able to teach at the University of Utah and Westminster, both alma maters, is a great opportunity. And I love being on campus, and I'm looking forward to hopefully as we get through the pandemic to being on campus more often. And then career. Some of the companies, my primary job is VP of Operations at Clear, and then I also do some consulting for another company called CE Zoom. All of these have demands on my time, and so I need to define what success looks like in each of these categories. And I categorize these because I think oftentimes we may find ourselves allocating more time resources or more energies in some activities than others, and it leaches away from maybe what our primary goals are. And so balancing those goals is important. So define success, understanding that it's unique to every individual. The other one is understanding opportunity costs. And opportunity costs are basically if you use time, in this case, we'll look at time, if you use time in one area or if you use energy in one area, then that's time and energy that can't be used in another. So each activity has the value of the activity itself, but then there's the opportunity cost of that activity? What other things could have been done instead of that activity? So this goes back to this idea of when I'm focusing on personal success, that means that that's time that I might not be focusing on career success or teaching success or family success. And when I'm focusing on family success, there's an opportunity cost in those other areas. And so understanding the opportunity cost is what allows us to balance that and not over allocate our time and energy and balance it among our goals. So once we understand and have defined success, then we need to develop a strategy. So understanding and defining success is only helpful in so much that it gives us a direction, it gives us a goal, and we still have to get there. We still have to decide how we're going to get there. And that's where developing a strategy comes in. How are we going to meet our expectation of success? Well, one of my favorite quotes regarding strategy comes from Jeff Bezos, I saw it from him, rather. I'm not sure if he's the original person that said it, but it says, "Success requires a strategy, and complaining is not a strategy." Think for a moment, how often do we spend time and energy thinking about how maybe we were wronged, or how we didn't have control in a situation and it's not fair, or if only the stars were aligned, then everything would be working out? Well, there's some catharsis that comes from that type of thinking, and I'm not saying that you should never be frustrated or complain, but understanding that really the energy and the time spent in that frustration or complaining is not pushing you forward to achieve that goal. And so success requires a strategy, and complaining is not a strategy. The other side of that too is that you're responsible for balancing the demands of your own time. It's not the responsibility of the family or the employer or the school to determine how your time is allocated. It's your responsibility to determine how you're going to allocate your time, understanding that you may have to make concessions, and understanding that there may be some opportunity costs lost by how you decide to balance those times. I think about an employee that I had, and fantastic employee. She was in our sales department, and she was living in the Midwest at the time, and had an opportunity to go back to school, but the school she wanted to attend was in California. And so she approached us and said, "Hey, I really want to go back to school. I know that the company encourages and will even help with tuition, but the school I want to go to is outside of my region, outside of my assigned work area. And there's already another employee that lives in the area that I want to go to school." And she says, "But I really want to go to school, and I really want to keep my job, so what are you going to do for me?" And we said, "Well, this is challenging. If you can still manage your area and maybe fly back and forth, or and we were trying to brainstorm ideas, but essentially it came down to she ultimately wanted us to move her and break the area that the other employee was in, so she could, and carve her out an area in that area so she could go to school. And this was the conversation that we had, is that ultimately we were willing to work with her on that, but there was a conflict, and she had to look at an opportunity cost. And the idea was she could go to the school that she wanted to, but it would mean that she wouldn't be able to have this job because it didn't line up with the area she was going to school. Or she could keep the job she really liked and go to another school in the area that she was at that was a reputable school, and but wasn't necessarily the one that she really wanted to go to. And so in the end, it was her responsibility to decide how she was going to approach that, and not the responsibility of the school and not the responsibility of work, beyond reasonable accommodation. to make that work for her. So when it comes to time, when it comes to the demands on our time, ultimately at the end of the day, we're responsible for how we decide to address those. And then one of the most important parts of strategy is strategies are often defined by no. I like to say in business there are an infinite number of good opportunities, but there's not an infinite number of resources to chase those opportunities. And so strategies are based on which opportunities do you say no to because they don't best lead to you to what your goals and what your objectives are. This is one for me that hits kind of close to home. I suffer from FOMO pretty bad. I suffer from the fear of missing out pretty heavily. And there are so often conflicting opportunities, and it causes, duress to think about missing out on some of these opportunities. And I find that when there is this conflict, the best thing to do is look at the opportunities and just objectively ask which one is going to get me closer to meeting my goals, which one is aligned with what I want to achieve. Doesn't mean it's not hard, and doesn't mean that I feel bad for missing out, but at least there's a guideline for determining what to do with our time, not based on whether it's we perceive it as a good use of time, but does it actually fit within the process of achieving our goals. So we've talked about defining success, and this is in order. So defining success, understanding what you want to achieve. We've talked about developing a strategy. How do you plan on getting there? And now we're getting into the actual activity part of this. Like, what do you do? How do you achieve this? And this for me, number 3 is blocking my time. And blocking my time is this idea of creating constraints. Constraints, oftentimes, I'm in operations, and constraints are generally perceived as bad. We look for bottlenecks, we look for things that slow processes, and we try and eliminate constraints. I've taken a little bit of a different approach in my professional life, and I like to add constraints because I find that if you end cap activities and you end cap time, that you act more efficiently in that time. And I'll give you a quick example. Years ago, I was in the chocolate industry. I owned a small chocolate company in Utah called Utah Truffles. And the company was growing very rapidly. And we were growing under our own, we were funding our own growth, which meant that from a cash flow perspective, things could get pretty lean as we were investing all of our profits back into the company. And so we had limited resources, we had huge demand, and tying all of this together was pretty heavy and took a lot of my energy and my focus. And I got into a bad habit, and the habit was that I would just say, well, I'm going to work until it's done, or I don't know what time I'll be home. And so I'd call my wife at 1 or 2 in the afternoon and say, hey, you know what, I'm not sure if what time I'm gonna make it home tonight. I got to get all this stuff done. And I started unconstraining my work day. I started taking away that work is finished at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And I started working very late, and in fact, the last year that I was in the chocolate business, I slept in my office over 30 times that year. And what I found in retrospect is that I actually didn't accomplish any more than when I was working within a blocked time. In fact, oftentimes I would accomplish less. And that's because my mind would be, well, I can do it later. I don't have to be home tonight. I don't have anything that's taking my time other than this work. I can push it down, or I can spend longer on this project. And it kind of takes away the urgency. And that experience made me a huge believer in this idea of blocking time, adding constraints. And there's a lot that goes into this psychologically, that we operate differently when we have deadlines versus when we open up our time and have unstructured, unblocked time. And so, if you look at my calendar, I use similar colors for the different areas. And so, family is blocked out as yellow. Personal time is green. The red is class, and then the blue is work. And it doesn't always fit so nicely. Certainly, there are variables that happen throughout the day, but at least I have an idea of what I'm working on. And this blocking of time, it looks busy, it maybe looks overwhelming if you don't already use a calendaring option. But for me, it helps me operate more efficiently. And you'll see that I actually put in time for things like on Saturday and Sundays, I need a nap. I've got time in there to go climbing at Momentum. I've got big time blocked out for skiing. Obviously, this was created during the months of skiing. And so, it looks busy, but it's just structuring the activities that I want to accomplish throughout the week. So, and then the second piece of that is that I have a to-do file. And what I have all of my activities, and I have them broken up. And so this is my work one. I have one for teaching. I have one for family. And as I'm going throughout the day, I just have a to-file one, and I just type in what the activities are that I need to get done. What do I need to accomplish? And then as I sit down and I say, okay, I have time blocked out for this project, then I go and I look at the activities tied to that project, and that helps me get through it. And this really does come to this idea of understanding the power of constraints. This idea of constraining time, this idea of constraining activity, what it does is that when you act unconstrained, you don't give enough respect to the opportunity cost. And so going back to the example of working late nights and sleeping at the factory, I felt like I was doing productive things because I was working, and yet what I was doing is I was stealing from the other areas of my life, from my family, from my personal, and even from my teaching. And so constraints are not about limiting something, but they're about making sure that we allocate energies to all the areas that we want to accomplish. I saw this article earlier this year, and it was really fascinating. It's revenge bedtime procrastination could be robbing you of precious sleep. And the gist of the article is that we go throughout the day accomplishing so much that we don't give ourselves enough me time. And so when it's time to go to bed, all of a sudden the brain says, wait a second, I'm not ready to go to sleep yet. I want some me time. And so we may mindlessly do activities. I mean, the phones obviously have made that a lot easier. But we spend time unstructured trying to claw back me time. And usually that happens because we've let the other areas in our life, work and school, rob us of our own time. And then that me time then robs us of our sleep time, and it creates this cycle. There's a great TED Talk called Inside the Mind of a Procrastinator that I would recommend everybody take the time to look at. And it's a really fascinating one because, and there's a lot that comes out of it, but for me, and how it relates to this time management is that procrastination is actually very effective in that we operate, like I said, differently under constraints. The challenge with procrastination, of course, are the variables. And so you've got the time monster or the deadline monster on the left there, and then you've got the monkey brain that just wants to go out and play and gets distracted easily, and then of course the responsible part of the brain that feels completely lack of power. So don't have time to watch it during this, but I would highly suggest it, Inside the Mind of a Procrastinator on TED. I'm going to show you a little bit of a hack that I use. And when I started constraining time and using blocking method, it's easy, in my mind it was easier to do it in 1 hour and 30-minute and 15-minute segments. And I was kind of missing out on maybe some of the exercise that I needed to get throughout the day. And so what I realized is that it was hard for me to set aside and stick to an hour of exercise during the day. But what wasn't hard was to do a few squats every hour, or a few burpees every hour, or a few dips, push-ups, and whatnot. And so I have my alarm set on my phone that every hour on the 55, an alarm goes off and it tells me what I need to do. And basically I stop what I'm doing and I do 10 squats. And really it takes less than a minute, and in often cases less than 30 seconds to do these activities. And yet when I started doing this, I found that I felt like I was getting a lot of good exercise. I was sore, and what was happening is it wasn't really taking much time out of my day, because it was 30 seconds to a minute every hour, instead of blocking this hour and saying, okay, I've got to get into the right mindset to go down in my basement and exercise, and I wasn't all into it. And so this is a little bit of a hack where it's this idea that there are little points throughout the day where you can maybe even steal a little bit of time. So may work for some, may not others. I just threw in a hack there for you. So we blocked our time, and now here comes the hard part, right? So these first three, fun activity actually. Thinking about what you want to achieve and what you want to succeed at, developing a strategy. It's fun. Like, how am I going to approach it? What are the things that I need to do? And even blocking the time is an activity that you feel like you're accomplishing something, and you're like, hey, this is, I'm going to be really organized and get all this done. And then it comes to the focus part. And this is where things start to fall apart. And so we look at it, and it's what is focus? So focus can only occur when we have said yes to one option and no to all other options. And focus is this idea that we are present in the activity that we're engaged in. Another one I like is what you don't do determines what you can do. Again, this is the idea of opportunity cost. Where we put our energies and where we put our time has to be determined as something that we want to accomplish or go towards what we want to accomplish. When we look at this, focus is a skill. It's something that can be learned. There are people that are natural at focus, and there are people that are not natural at focus. And they can be within the same family. I have a brother that is very skilled at focus. It's something that came natural to him. He did fantastically well in school. He's able to, he does music, he does some movie stuff, and his ability, his natural innate ability to sit down and shut everything else and focus has been something that's really advantageous to him. I am on the complete opposite end of the scale. Focus is challenging for me, and it's been something that I've had to learn. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at what are ways to improve focus as a skill. So, as with anything, any skill, getting better requires information, tools, goals, patience, and failure. And that failure one is so key. There have been so many times I fail at improving focus all the time. And it just takes doing it over and over again and trying to get better. Some of the things that I do, and again, it's going to be different for everyone, but some of the things that I do to help with my focus is that I am a note taker. I take notes at virtually every setting. And interestingly, I very, very, very rarely ever go back on my notes. I very rarely look at what I wrote down. But the act of writing, the act of taking notes, keeps me present in whatever I'm engaged in. and so that's something that's a tool or something you can apply as well. I would suggest looking up opportunities for focus and tools for focus, and there's a lot out there. But the first thing to do would be to do kind of a self-analysis and say, are you a good focuser, or are you challenged with focusing? And understanding where you're at with focus currently can help dictate how you will proceed and improve focus going forward. It is important to know, though, that there is a difference between optimizing and multitasking. Generally, multitasking is not possible. Multitasking, a lot of times people think that they can do two things at once, and generally multitasking is switching focus back and forth. And there are a lot of studies that show that even if you're able to switch focus very rapidly, it's not as efficient as optimizing your time and focusing in on something. Now, that's not across the board, right? So when I go for a run, my brain isn't fully focused on the run. Generally, I'm listening to a podcast, some music. If I'm teaching at the time, I'll listen to podcasts or information or articles relevant to what the topic I'm studying to stay up to date. So not doing two things at once. There are opportunities for multitasking, but anything that requires focus, if you're doing two things that require focus, you're switching back and forth. And studies have shown that optimizing means just focusing on one, completing one, and then moving on to the other. Being very deliberate about what you're spending your energy on. The other side of focus that's important is the importance of routine and environment. Really, at the end of the day, the key to focus is to remove choices, okay? And then create distraction barriers. Create barriers for distractions so that they aren't able to break your focus. One of my favorite books, and what's interesting is it's not even necessarily on this topic specifically, but there's so much that comes out of this book, The Power of Habits. And as it applies to what we're talking about right now, The Power of Habits, there's a section in it that talks about kind of the importance of environment in our decisions. And after I read this book, I was struggling with sleeping. I was doing that thing where I was trying to claw back personal time as I was getting into bed. And I read this book and thought, that's really interesting. I'm going to try some of this out. And the idea is that because I was giving myself so many choices when I went to bed, my brain was still working trying to figure out what to do, right? And so what were the choices I was giving myself as I went to bed? Well, am I reading a book? Am I watching TV? Am I cruising through my cell phone? And so my head would hit the pillow and my brain's like, all right, what are we going to do? And then it was struggling, and it's like, oh, I'll look at my phone for a little bit. Oh, I need to go to sleep. Oh, I'm not sleeping very well. Let me turn on the TV. Oh, there's nothing on. This feels like a waste of time. Let me start reading a book. And really what I needed to do was just go to sleep. And so my wife and I, we removed distractions from the bedroom. So no cell phones in the bedroom, no books in the bedroom, no TV in the bedroom. And basically the idea is that over time, training my brain and our brains that when we hit the pillow, it was like, oh, we're going to sleep. There's no other options here. And it was actually quite successful, and I started doing it in other areas of my life. So at work, again, I would have a hard time focusing on a project. And so basically, I removed all distractions from my desk. No longer eat at my desk. No longer, do personal phone calls at my desk. I no longer do social media at my desk or cruise the internet or whatever. My desk is a place just for work, and it's been very helpful. One more quick example, I like to read, but the challenge is before we decided to do this, I was reading in bed, and I could read 1 or 2 pages and then start drifting off, and I was having even if I wasn't tired, I would start falling asleep when I was reading. And so we established a place in my office at home, and it's a chair, and it's my reading chair. I do nothing else in that chair but reading. And the idea is that when I sit down, my brain says, oh, we're reading. And it's one less barrier, or one less barrier to focus. So removing choices, not getting distracted by squirrels. Okay? The other thing too is that we're in a time where our focus and our attention is a commodity, and it's a commodity that companies are trying to capture. And so know your enemy. There's a battle for your attention raging, and the odds are far from fair. Another quick recommendation on something to watch is this film, The Social Dilemma. And it basically talks about the internet and social media, and it comes down to say, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. And your attention and your focus is a valuable commodity that companies are trying to get the most of. And what's interesting in this movie is that in this documentary is it shows just how much technology, effort, and capital goes in to capturing your attention. And oftentimes we're giving our attention away for free without even realizing that it's being aggressively taken from us. So, if you're really interested in time management and figuring out ways to improve and optimize your usage, watch The Social Dilemma. It creates a paradigm that makes it a little bit easier to stand up against. And there are only two industries that call their customers users: illegal drug and software. So if we look at it that way, we realize that we are being targeted, our attention is being targeted, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to focus. So awareness, I'm not suggesting to not engage in any kind of social media or any kind of software or gaming or anything like that, but just an awareness of what the goal and objective of the other side is can help you better do that. So at work, another hack based on this for me is I choose an anchor task. Like, what am I going to do? And that's blocked in. I manage my energy and not my time. And so what I look at is that if there's certain type of tasks throughout the day, and this goes mostly for work, that I want to be able to do. So if it's highly quantitative, and if it involves a lot of analysis and number crunching and a lot of energy and attention, I choose to do that task at a time where I have energy and attention. And if there's other things that are maybe a little bit more mundane and data entry or research or whatnot, then I choose to do those tasks when maybe my attention isn't as high or my energy levels aren't as high. Another one is create email boundaries. I turn off my email alerts when I can. You've heard a couple dings throughout this. Obviously, my email alert is on for some reason. But the idea is that we are in this time when people think that they expect an immediate response. Well, create a boundary and respond and create a timeline to respond to emails that works best for your situation and what you're trying to achieve. I personally do my emails in the morning, so each morning when I come into work, I set up a time to kind of look through the day, what I'm going to be working on. I go through the emails that morning. I classify them as immediate response, or I'll put them in my, I'll categorize them into the projects I'm working on, and will respond later. And generally, I look at my emails once every 2 hours is kind of how I have that blocked out. And then I have another larger space of time at the end of the day, of the work day, where I wrap up my emails. And then the other one is to work in full screen mode. I find that I used to have all my different programs up, and I realized that what that was doing was it was forcing me to multitask and switch my attention back and forth, and really just focusing in, using a full screen cutting out all those variables, cutting out those squirrels, and cutting out anything that will distract us from what we want to achieve during that block of time. And then, so these are all kind of environmental, psychological. There is a physiological component to focus as well, and it's really simple: sleep, water, and exercise. Getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, and exercising is directly tied to the ability to focus, because focus requires energy, and sleep, water, and exercise are great ways of replenishing energy in the body. So we've talked about defining success, talked about developing a strategy, we've talked about blocking time, talked about training ourselves to focus, and number 5 here is be realistic. Don't overshoot, okay? Over-optimism about your abilities can lead to discouragement and frustration, okay? Look for small wins. Don't go from 0 to 100 right away. Find a project that you've been needing to do. Find something that you want to accomplish. Find something that you can do with a minimal amount of energy that will build your confidence and be a success, and that you can parlay and roll into additional ones. Don't start from the beginning from being someone that maybe struggle with time management and expecting that within a day or two that you're going to apply all of these concepts and be a professional at it. Go for the small wins first and develop and grow into that. And then lastly, treat yourself. Okay? Again, at the end of the day, what this is all about is achieving your goals, your objectives, and celebrate those. Celebrate the accomplishments. Celebrate those things that you've achieved and those things that you've done well. Spending all that time, energy, and effort, and never stopping and relishing in what you've accomplished will lead to discouragement in the future. So hopefully these insights have given you a little bit of ability to start controlling time a little bit better. And again, it's about self-control. So become a time expert. Don't remain a time victim. Thanks for spending the time with me. Again, go back. Power of Habits, Inside the Mind of a Procrastinator, and Social Dilemma are great resources to go look at. And there are so many tools that you can use that are available. Just make sure that the tools are supporting your goals and that the tools don't become what you have to spend your time managing or maintaining. So good luck to everyone, and thanks for the time.